choya Zangpo pa gyu trashi pa tuche tempe trile yarngoda pelge drolor zambe ze parache pande alame shabla de omo a guru vajradara suma timo nishas Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Omo A Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timo Nishas Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om A Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timo Nishas Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Omo A Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timo Nishas Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Omo A Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timo Nishas Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timo Nish Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timo Nisha Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Pakyuke Kudhang Yandaki Pakyuke Sundang Daki Pakyuke Tudang Daki Yi Tuyerme Chiktu Chingiolo Pakyuke Kudang Dhagilu Pakyuke Sundan Daginga Pakyuke Tudang Dhagiyi Yerme Chiktu Chingilo Makyuke Ku Dhagilu Makyuke Sundan Dagina Makyuke Tudang Dhagiyi Tuyerme Chiktu Chingilo Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakya Sashipe ki choshiameto Chamare ravalingashi Nide gempadi Sange shintu Mikte ulwarki Drokun namda shingla Chöpar Yedam Guru Ratna Mindra La Kamniryata Yami Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Chushe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Chushe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Chushe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupar Sho. Nel Buddha, nel Dharma e nel Sangha prendo rifugio fino all'illuminazione. Con la pratica della generosità e delle altre perfezioni possa io ottenere lo stato di Buddha per il beneficio di tutti gli esseri senzienti. In the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I take refuge into enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Namo ya lai ke da luda nu chin ke drubunda da mi ke namdam drowa kuin ke dhanama che sampa thamche ke to da ge chuten.
When we look around ourselves here and we see all these paintings, one of the important things is that there are two types of image, mainly. One represented the masters of the lineage who did the transmission of the teachings, put them into practice. And then in other images there are representations, putting it in a few words, of archetypes representing the qualities that we ourselves can develop. And then there are also sacred beings such as Buddhas and so on, but anyway, that they represent the qualities that we can develop. And what happens is that one of the fundamental points is the relationship, is the aspect of the human connection, the relationship that happens really where exists an experience, a knowledge that passes from generation to generation. And somehow it's important for us to know our own roots. This is something that helps. When we create contact with our roots and understand where does it come from, what we receive, somehow that helps us to connect and we perceive it with a different taste. There is something, my personal experience is that the deeper we go on our own intimate relationship with our masters of the lineage, from who that teaching comes from, then somehow the words that we hear are really not the same and they have like a different taste, a power of getting into us that is different. And so it's not a matter uniquely of knowing the aspects, the technical aspects of the teachings, but there is a fundamental aspect of knowing where do they come from and to create this relationship. And somehow it's like a bit like also on a daily level in daily life when we are told something. Is there a difference? There is a difference depending on who says it. There is also this way of saying it, but who say that? So it really depends very much on who that information comes from. Ah, no, this person said it. Ah, well, whatever then. And no, this other person said it. Ah, then it must make some sense. So it already is part of our normal way of our daily life to give value to a person, and when we give value to a person, we also give value to what that person is saying to us. And this is the first point in these teachings. Is the first point is to understand who is the person, where does this come from, and to create more contact. And when Lama Tsong Khapa wrote, we were in the 1402 when this text was published, and there were it's his origins, like where he started from. But now today we start a bit later from that. So somehow for us it's important to understand why and how are we here today. And this map that came to us now, what is the path that he took? Who put it into practice? Who wrote it? Why was it in this way? Somehow it's important for us to create this connection, this human connection. And so there are some names that it's important bit by bit to get to know. And as for today, there are many different ways to obtain information, and so to do some research, to read about the lives of these people and to understand what they were, where they come from, and so on, without having to do it ourselves and to check the life. Also because honestly I don't remember so much the details of all the masters. I have a general view, and it's interesting to see that there are those who touch our heart more and we don't even know why. And in India there had been two monasteries that were most important. One was Nalanda, second Vikramashila. Nalanda was founded around 300 years after the death of Buddha. So we are talking about the year more or less around 200 years before Christ. This was more or less when Nalanda was founded, which was also founded with the support of the king Ashoka, and it became a huge institution of study of everything, and mostly of Buddhism, but you would also study dialectic and medicine, law. It was a very important center of study on a global scale at the time. There was an exchange also, and it's interesting to see that today now we take texts. For example, when you get into dialectic, there are different aspects that are very, very similar that we go and find both in the tradition, the original Buddhist tradition that comes from the Nalanda monastery, and both also on from some Greek philosophical traditions that are somewhat contemporary. And so now we think that at the time we would meet each other and get to exchange, but there was much more exchange than we think. And Nalanda was an enormous study center of study, and there was this other one, Vikramashila, and there are two main masters from who these teachings come from. We don't get into the details of their lives, but I invite you to do some research. One is Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna has been the one that has established in a clear way all the part that is related to the correct view of reality, so how reality is, with its correct way of perceiving it, and so on. And for example, now as today there is this Italian writer, quite well known, that is Carlo Rovelli, and in one of his books, where he speaks about the history of quantum physics and he explained the vision of quantum physics, there is a chapter dedicated to Nagarjuna, where with a very scientific approach, not mystic at all, he says, or at least so I remember that the exact words, I don't really have them in mind, but he was saying, among all the philosophers that I've studied up to today in the Western world, and he has studied a lot, the only one that has managed with a perfect clarity to explain the reality in a coherent way with what is the modern view inside quantum physics was Nagarjuna. In the sense that Nagarjuna was explaining what Buddha Shakyamuni transmitted, but Carlo Rovelli read the text of Nagarjuna, so the root of wisdom of the middle way. I have read it, there is also an English translation, but very tiring. It's a text that is not simple to understand. But Nagarjuna, the point is that he was a person that commented what is the correct view of reality, took the sutras of Buddha, and I repeat, as I said this morning, they are difficult to understand, very long, and he put them in a clear, linear way with many examples, structured, and that has remained one of the firm points inside of Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist practice. And the other important character, is Asanga. Asanga has put emphasis mainly on the aspect of developing love and compassion and the development of generosity, morality, patience, of enthusiastic effort, put emphasis on the different stages, gradual, of the spiritual path, and it has been one of the other masters really important in the history of Buddhism. So we have these two main masters. Then there have been also other important masters such as Shantideva, who wrote the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. But now let's remember these two names, Nagarjuna and Asanga. Buddhism came to Tibet initially with the first time with Guru Padmasambhava and Shantarakita, if I remember well. Sometimes with name I do a bit of confusion. At the beginning in Tibet there was an animistic religion tradition that exists still today. There is the Bon tradition, Palden Shiwatsu in Tibetan. And together with Padmasambhava, she was Serb, and Padmasambhava brought Buddhism to Tibet, and he tried to do that on his own, but it was very difficult because both from how is Tibet like as a region, but also in like as a spiritual tradition. It was a place of magic, of spirits. It was a very strong animistic thing, and it was necessary someone that could also know that word. And so what happened is that Guru Padmasambhava arrived, which was a Buddhist master, and it was very capable in all these things. And it is said that in Tibet, before that Dharma was transmitted to people, it was necessary to transmit it first to the spirits, because first you had to tame the elements and the spirits to convert them, to then after that convert the people. So Guru Padmasambhava also had that job, and there had been a time of big growth of Buddhism in Tibet, and in a very beautiful way, because then it was able to integrate well with the local culture. Also, when we look at prayer flags, now we think that is a Buddhist thing. Yes and no, because Buddhist prayers, flags, have origin in the Bon tradition. Then with Buddhism, uh, basically what changes what it's written there, so like Buddhist prayers, but they originated much before than that. And so like this, many different other things that got adapted to the local culture. And then the Bon culture, tradition kept existing and still today, but Buddhism bit by bit started to grow. And there was a point where there was an important reign with Buddhism, and there were different internal wars. And at a certain point, this reign went, the generation lost its power, collapsed, and Buddhism, together with that, lost strength, because once, in order for a religious tradition or also medical tradition would be able to grow in a place, it was necessary that the king would agree with that, so that the king would put money, give permission, and so there was a point where Buddhism in Tibet grew and then degenerated. And when there was this period of degeneration, there was also a king that was called the Dharma, and it is said that this king that was totally against Buddhism, and up to today, now later, but there is the tradition that when like now it's mostly like the older traditions, when they greet someone in a respectful way, there is the tendency of putting one hand on the head and another one on the back, and to put the tongue out and to say hi like this. And this why? Because it is said that this king had one horn on the head and the tail and the black tongue. So it's a way to say that I'm not against Buddhism, I'm not part of this king. I don't have a horn and I don't have tail, and my tongue is not black. And then traditionally, it's also in a respectful way. There is also like a bit of sucking thing. I've seen this scene many times, but now you don't really see it a lot. But the point is that this king destroyed a lot of Buddhism. So he forced the monks to break the vows, he destroyed the monasteries. They will go in the various monasteries, and it will say these statues, and you will say, these gods are not real, and he will break the statue and will say, see, they're not even complaining. And there was this rule that the only statues that you couldn't break are the statues where you try to break them and then they kind of complain or do something about it. And there are still some of these statues that remain, like they maybe have like a slash of sword. But then the point is that there was like this king, Yeshe, that wanted to revitalize Buddhism in Tibet. And what it did was to choose 29 men, of kids of the best family, intelligent, and give them a good education, and he sent them in India to study Buddhism. And in this process of them to go to India, of 29 that went to India, one only survived. Because at the time it was not like a simple journey, it was like very difficult, long journey. And so what happened is that out of 29, 28 died, one survived, and he is called Lotsawa Rinchen Zangpo, and he came back. Lotsawa means translator, and he started translating the text from Sanskrit to Tibetan. He established some monasteries, did a lot of work to re-establish Buddhism in Tibet, but he realized that alone he couldn't do it. So he went to the king, Yeshe, and he said, okay, look, we need to invite someone that is really good. And in India there is the master Atisha. And he started to talk about this great master that was called Atisha, of great importance here and there. And Yeshe said, okay, well, that's fine. So he did a fundraising, because let's remember that when you went to India in a great monastic institution such as the monastery of Vikramashila, and to ask them to send to Tibet the greatest master, it's as if someone will come here today in Albagnano, and we are 1,000 times smaller than that, and someone will come from really far, like a place with a bad reputation, like a dangerous place and so on, a land of barbarians, and said, no, we came to bring Michel away, and for indeterminate time, what will be the answer of the administration of the center. So, as a minimum, they had to show that they had the resources to offer the best. And at the time, what they did is to bring some offerings. So the fact that they will bring some offering in gold, it was a way of saying, okay, look, we're not poor, like desperate, we have the resources to take care in the best way. So they did fundraising in Tibet to collect some offerings to bring at the monastery of Vikramashila to ask to Atisha to come. And there they made a group of 9 people that left. And out of this, 8 died along the journey, and only 1 survived. And he didn't manage to invite Atisha. They didn't accept the request, and he never came back to Tibet again. Yeshe goes on with this proposition, and he again tries, okay, we have to make this effort again, and he leaves again with a bigger fundraising, going in various reigns to collect funds, to invite Atisha to come to Tibet, and at a certain point he gets to a small reign, Kang Mongkolo, and that welcomes him. And then, as he is in there, he pretended that he was favorable to Buddhism, and then he puts him in prison. And then actually he said, no, actually I welcomed you just because I wanted to stop what you were doing. And he tells the nephew, it was Janchup that came after him, look, if you want your uncle, the king, alive, you need to bring his weight in gold. And at this point the fundraising changes goal, and from inviting, okay, we bring Atisha to Tibet, no, we save the life of the king. And then they start with this, they collect a lot of money, they bring it there, and when they get there and to offer that gold to get the king back alive, it is said to them, they weigh it, and they say, look, your gold is enough for the body without the head. We give your uncle, your king, without the head. And there they start a tractative. And at a certain point the king manages to talk, and this is said from, okay, like from the cell of the prison, he manages to hide in a place, and they manage to talk in a bit of a hidden way. And Yeshe says to Janchup, and he says, okay, look, my life I've already given, I've already lived many years. More important than my life is the fact that Atisha is able to come here. Many have already given their lives so that Atisha can come here. I also give mine. So take all this gold that you have collected, leave me here, and bring it to Tibet, telling that you're not uniquely bringing gold, but also my life together with it. And so they did. And so this new group of expedition was created, because at the time it's not like there were big ways open, so they had to cross Himalayas, and it was very complicated. And they went with this new expedition where there was Zangpo, the nephew of the king, that went to make this request. And as he got to Nalanda, there were a lot of obstruction because the monastery Vikramashila, actually not Nalanda, they really didn't want Atisha to go away. And so they didn't allow him to see him, they didn't give him appointment, the time would pass, and then they would also learn the language. It was not such a simple thing to do. Then at a certain point they managed to talk, they bring all the offerings, but what has the greatest weight is the fact that the king offered his life. Zangpo gave all the assurances that it would be protected and safe, that it would have all the conditions to teach correctly, and he makes an oath on his own life that within 3 years Atisha will come back. And not only that, but Atisha, the final question falls back on Atisha, and he goes to retreat, and during this retreat on Tara, he has a vision of Tara in front of the statue of Tara. It's as if the statue will be talking to him, and she said, okay, if you go to Tibet, your life will be shorter, but it will be of more benefit for the Dharma and for the beings. And you can still see the statue of Tara in Bodh Gaya, the place where Buddha reached enlightenment, where there is the main temple, and on the left side there is a smaller temple, all like kind of dark, and inside of there is this stone statue of Tara, and it's the statue in front of which Atisha had this vision. And the point is that Atisha, has this vision and decides to go to Tibet. And here begins the expedition. So first they go in the monastery from Vikramashila to Nepal. Then Atisha stays almost 2 years in Nepal along the journey to go to Tibet. You could travel only in summer. There would be the winter with difficult conditions, and in the meantime he did many important Dharma things in Nepal. Also now in Kathmandu there is a temple. There is in Tamil, in the most touristic part of Kathmandu now. There is the place where Atisha lived, and we were in pilgrimage last year in February. We went to this place, and so Atisha gets to Tibet. He spends his first 3 years to teach in this region of Nari, which is close to the border, with a lot of success. Creates a strong connection, and after these 3 years he needs to come back. But when he has to come back, there is a war along the border between Tibet and Nepal, and so it will be very dangerous to bring him in. And so Atisha says, don't worry, to Zangpo, send someone, I write a letter explaining all the reasons, and he sent as a present for the abbot the text of the lamp that clarifies the gradual path to enlightenment. That is the basis of the LamRim, that he wrote as a result of those 3 years that he lived in Tibet. And when the abbot received this, he remains profoundly touched, and he says, a text special like this, Atisha, he could have never wrote it if he stayed here, because he would have just kept following the structure as we are used to doing. But having to adapt to a new reality, he created a manual, a map to enlightenment as we had never seen before, and this text by itself is worth more than anything else. So the commitment that King has with me, the case, Atisha can remain in Tibet for as long as he wants, and so he stays there for a total of 17 years. And before this, let's try to understand a bit who was Atisha. Atisha was a prince. He was born in what is now Bangladesh. He was the middle brother of 3. It is said that he was a very kind and intelligent kid, and when he was 11 years old, he had to marry. And at that time, all the marriages were arranged, so it's not like you would pick each other across different reigns. And the night before the wedding, he had a very strong dream with Tara, telling him that it would have been a disaster if he got married. So he decides to not get married. I don't know how he convinced father and mother, and he follows a religious life. And at that point, it's interesting because the first part of his life he dedicates the tantra. So he becomes, for many years, he receives teachings from different Mahasiddhas, among which Naropa and many others. And he dedicates this period of life to meditation. And it is said that he had a level of knowledge also when he was young on medicine, astrology, philosophy, dialectic, on the meditative point of view, a really high level of concentration. It becomes quite important in his field. And when he's 29, he has a vision of Buddha that tells him to follow the monastic life. So he becomes a monk, and after having followed all the path of Tantra, after having meditated for years, and he starts to follow the monastic way without abandoning the Tantra part, and he becomes also a great expert on all the philosophical part, and even there becomes very well known, important, receives invitation in the monastery of Vikramashila, where he was. It is said that he was also the administrator of Vikramashila, and he had like an infinite amount of keys that he would always bring with himself, and he was able to manage the difficulties at the time, also with famine, during a period of famine. And so this is something also to say. Also Nagarjuna was an administrator of the Nalanda monastery at some point. There was a famine at a certain point, and he had the knowledge to transmute iron in gold. He was a great alchemist, and so he used this knowledge in alchemy to keep the monastery alive. That's what it said. But anyway, Atisha, at some point when he was around 33 years old, Atisha sees that he had like a wonderful level of concentration, of meditation, knowledge of the teachings of Buddha, excellent. He had many disciples. He was very prepared, but he wanted something more. He needed to open his heart really, and to develop really an unconditional love by all means. And he realized that in order to do that, knowledge alone wasn't necessary. So he needed to be close to someone who had that unconditional love. And I don't know how he decided to go to Indonesia, because he heard about a master that was called Guru Suvarnadipa, that was in the island of Sumatra in Indonesia. And I don't know how it worked at the time, that at a certain point one that was in India at the beginning of the 11th century decided to go to Indonesia, where he got the news of that master. Maybe now at that time we think that you couldn't communicate, but maybe there was much more than we think. But anyway, Atisha decides this, and he leaves with 300 disciples, and they get into this big ship to go to Indonesia. He leaves everything that he had in India, and he leaves for Indonesia. And the way to go to Indonesia was around 14 months by ship, because it's a way also of which I asked an expert navigator. But is it true that someone can spend 14 months on a ship? Look, That is one of the most difficult ways that there are, because there are all the currents that make you go back constantly. And yes, so of course it's possible. So Atisha stays with his disciples on this ship leaving for Indonesia, and he stays there for 10 months with many storms. Everything happened. But the point is that at the end, he manages to get there. He goes to meet Guru Suvarnatipa, and he asks Guru Suvarnatipa not only to give him teachings, but if he could stay side by side to him in the daily life and to receive teachings. He gets accepted, and the first teaching that he receives from Guru Suvarnatipa is an explanation of the gradual path through what is called the ornament of the clear realization. And a few words of this say, just to connect with the text a bit, is the text that is studied for 9 years, around the 9 years. That is the basis also of the LamRim. And he receives these teachings for some years, and he remains side by side with the Guru for 12 years. And after these 12 years, there start to be some wars in Indonesia, where their royal family, the Buddhist reign, starts to lose power, and that's actually what happened after that. And so he gets back to India there, and he was 45 years old, and he becomes one of the most important masters that were there at the time, and in the history of Buddhism in general. And let's remember that that time in India was very delicate, because the Buddhism in India grew a lot, but there was something that Lama Rinpoche described as a sort of mistake. That Buddhism remained in custody, a sort of custody of the big institutions. So you had great monasteries where you had knowledge practice, but Hinduism actually was in custody of each family. So the masters had the wife, the children, and it was inside the families. And when the wars, where there was also the conversion from one religion to the other, one king from another religion would come and he would destroy all the monasteries and so on. And when this happened in the north of India, there was one wave of Islamic invasion, is that at a certain point the monasteries got destroyed. Nalanda got completely destroyed, and also Vikramashila completely destroyed. And in this process, Buddhism in India got lost, because the masters died, the reality where the teachings was sustained didn't exist anymore, and Hinduism never managed to destroy, because it was inside the families. So the only way to destroy it was to destroy all the families, something that was not possible. And also for this, Lama Rinpoche said it's more stable when a knowledge, an experience, a cultural tradition is inside of the social texture in a broader sense, and not uniquely in a custody of a few very special institutions. Of course, institutions have a value, but it's important that there is this texture. So when Atisha went to Tibet, it was also already a time where there was a certain degeneration of Buddhism in India, and so somehow the fact that Atisha went there, it was like a way of saying, you who are in custody of this knowledge in an excellent way, go there, to make it so that it remains alive somewhere else, because here we are already in a degeneration stage. And so it happened. And actually, also now, for the Buddhism in India, we don't see anything anymore. In the big monasteries, there are some archaeology things. There is a real tradition that is alive. And the Buddhist tradition that is in Tibet came from India, and from there it stayed alive up to now. And so Atisha went, and it is said that Atisha had an incredible level of morality, coherence in his own practice. It is said that even the vows that he will take, the commitments, even the smallest ones, he would do everything possible to keep them perfectly. And also when they went through caravan from India to Tibet, it is said that every very often he would stop to confess, to purify his mistakes. No, because I have broken this vow. At a certain point, I went to him and he said, Master, the way is long. We don't even understand what you're saying, and even less why is it good or not good, because it's not that there were such obvious things. There were things about vows that he took, like also very subtle. Even when we understand, we don't understand why this is wrong. Keep it just for you. No, Atisha said, because even the smallest negative conditionings, when they are kept hidden, they do nothing but grow. And when we see in ourselves a negative conditioning, an unhealthy attitude, something that is not good, that is manifesting, when we bring it to the light of the day, that is the first step to make sure that that doesn't happen again. That doesn't mean like to feel guilty about it, but not to hide from oneself. Atisha was a great master from the point of view of Sutra, of Tantra, and he had this marvelous capacity in his teachings of being very pragmatic in a certain sense, in the sense of going from the practical point of view to adapt what really everyone needed. And it is said that when he got to Tibet, they brought him to one of the temples that was there, this temple of Samye, very big, with many different levels and different halls, and each hall, every small temple, was for a different meditation practice. So there would be the temples for the sutra, the temples for the tantra, the 4 classes of tantra. So you had the temple for Vajrayogini, for Yamantaka, for Eruka, for Chakra Samvara, Eruka Chakra Samvara, for Kala Chakra, and many others. And when he saw this at the beginning, it was Rinchen Zangpo of the first 29, the only one that remained alive for the first expedition. That he says, no, he's a great master. He knows the Dharma. Why did you make it come here? But when he saw this temple, he understood. He said, okay, I understood what is my role here. You have all the teachings, but you don't know how to put them together. You leave them as something separate, where one part of the philosophy is here, another part is there, where there is a meditation practice here, another part is there, when actually all of these are nothing but parts of a single path, tools for a single path. And it's there that had that intuition from which it had this that he wanted to write this text. So the lamp that clarifies the gradual path to enlightenment, where he split the path in 3 steps that are called the lower making a translation that is quite modern, okay, the lower purpose, let's say, it's to become like a sane selfish, so to speak, when you understand, okay, what is healthy, what is good for you, what is not good for you, you try to cultivate what is good. The middle scope is where one is still part of the sane selfishness, and where okay, having the right conditions is not enough. I want to get out of the samsara, when one is able to see the inner dynamics and to understand by all means that as long as I'm taken by anger, jealousy, envy, ignorance and so on, there will be suffering. And so I don't want to create conditions that are favorable for that. I want to get out of samsara complete. And the higher scope, it's what is called we can call the mature selfish person. It's when one understands that selfishly speaking is better to be altruistic, and it develops an unconditional love and compassion. This is the 3rd point, so it divided in these 3 parts. And Atisha spent the the first 3 years.
9 anni nel Tibet centrale.
In Nari, then he spent around 9 years in central Tibet, and then another 5 years around the central Tibet and in general. And he left the body in a place called Nieta, which I remember it because every time that I had a chance to go to Tibet, almost every time, also the last time and also the next time we will come, one of the most important places is this monastery close to Lhasa, where Atisha left his body, where there is his throne. It's very simple, like a small throne made of terracotta, but it's a very special place. But in Tibet era this very big luck to have different people that were very special, that brought Buddhism. There was Padmasambhava, Geshe Shiwatsu, there was Marpa. So when today we see the 4 traditions of Buddhism, the Nimapa, Nima means old, is a tradition that follows the first wave of Tibet that came from Khenche Chiwatsu and Padmasambhava. And after that there was the tradition of Kagyu, who follow the tradition that came from India, from Marpa. It was the guru of Milarepa, disciple of and then after Atisha, it was a tradition originally called Kadampa. They were the disciples of Atisha. That also became 2 different traditions. One was Sakya Pandita, was called the Sakyapa tradition, and then also the Gelupa tradition with Lama Je Tsong Khapa. So in our lineage, the Buddhism comes from India through Atisha. So our point of connection with India has been Atisha. And one of the things for us that is particularly important is that Atisha, at some point, of course, he left the body, he died. And inside our own vision, Atisha got reincarnated many times, and he continued to guide and to help Buddhism in Tibet. And one of the lives after a subsequent of Atisha was Kyabche Rinchen Dorjichan, that is represented on my left. There is the root guru, the spiritual guide of Pabonka Rinpoche. So there is a very special connection with Atisha for us. So I cannot really say the why and the how. I've always been in love with Atisha. Since when I heard his name for the first time, his places, his texts are something that touched me deeply. And so for us, this is to have a first idea where do these teachings come from. And so there is a factor that with the texts of Atisha and his teachings, there is something that recalls what we live here now. It's when a spiritual tradition needs to adapt to a new reality. And it doesn't take for granted some aspects anymore, so it needs to adapt to the reality of the moment, when actually a tradition that is already established in a place has much more difficulty to adapt, to revisit some things, to re-explain some things. It's like saying, when we go and learn Buddhism from scratch, we want to know many things. One who grew up in a Buddhist context just simply does those things and doesn't even ask why. So these teachings start out of this context of adaptation. Atisha had different masters, different disciples, thousands. And you say that the disciples of Atisha got spread in the region of Kashmir, the region of Pakistan, or where now is Pakistan, Afghanistan. In Tibetan is said towards Persia. Then many disciples in Nepal, in Tibet, thousands of disciples. But for many years, it is said that he had a vision of Tara. His main disciple was a layman, and he had a vision of Tara saying this. And he was waiting for this, and then this person came in his drum tompa.
Riguardo con attenzione. Fatto sta che abbiamo anche lì sopra. Abbiamo il drum tompa.
Also there we have drum tompa. When we look on that side where there is the green part, we go a bit forward. You see Milarepa that is sitting there like that, with the body a bit blue-greenish. That is Milarepa. Then after that you have Sakya Pandita, and then one more where there is the lotus flower like that with the long black hair. That was the representation of Drum Tompa. Was the one that had the capacity to take the teachings of Atisha and to adapt them completely to the Tibetan culture, to the language and many other things. He is who was able to structure and to carry on his teachings, and he had many disciples that went on through the centuries. But who really took in his hands and to do a step forward, to adapt and to really manage to keep alive and to transmit his teachings was Lama Tsong Khapa. Lama Tsong Khapa, around 4 centuries after that, he, as we said before, was a person that started the spiritual path when he was very, very young. I don't think how it's possible less than that. So it was 1 year and a half to start to receive the spiritual formal education. And in the story of Lama Tsong Khapa, one of the special things of him was that he was a researcher, someone that will go deep in things, that wouldn't take things for granted. And even Lama Tsong Khapa came to a point where he was not happy of how the teachings were given, in the sense that he would find incoherence. And he would see that for what regarded some aspects of meditation in the Tantra, for what is related to the illusory body, the clear light, and the correct view of reality, there wasn't coherence. And at a certain point, Lama Tsong Khapa in his life, as he was meditating, had a vision, and he said that there are different kinds of visions. There are visions that one can have during the dreams, visions that one can have like kind of daydreaming. And there are visions that are as if you are speaking one in front of the other. And once I asked Lama Kanchen, the practice of self-ing, he created it after having some visions in Borobudur in Indonesia. Rinpoche, can you explain this? No, if I start to explain, then he would say that I am crazy and nobody would understand anything. We live in a time now where we have some difficulty in distinguishing some things. There is an important master in India that when he was a kid, very young, he asked a question, who am I? And at this point, because his teacher got angry with him as a kid, he answered, who you are, I don't know, either you're a god or a demon, probably the second. But he asked himself, who am I, by all means? But because as he was a kid, he was perceiving the teacher talking and remained like that. I don't know what is she saying. I know only what I understand. And so at a certain point, when the teacher said this, he took the same question, and then after went out for school, and he remained there in a state of meditation for days. And when he got out of this meditative state, there will be old people making offerings, asking for blessings, And I ask myself, but if the kid of someone of today sits there to meditate and he doesn't open the eyes again for 5 minutes, let alone 1 day or 2 days, then you call the ambulance and you go there and you take him, try to wake him up, something is wrong. So the context is a bit different. But the point is that Lama Tsongkhapa at some point has this vision of the Buddha of wisdom, Manjushri, and when he has this vision of Manjushri, he asks himself, but how can I trust this? Because the first question that he asks, okay, maybe it's just an emanation of my own mind, so maybe it's simply my own imagination. Or it can also be a being that it's not enlightened, that it's trying to trick me. And so the first thing that he does is to ask him questions to which he didn't know the answer. Or better, first he asks questions to which he knew the answer, but were very, very specific questions and difficult. When you go to read these questions, you even have a hard time to understand the question, let alone the answer. But the point is that he receives a perfect answer. So he says, okay, a being, an ordinary being is not, but it could be my own mind. So how can I make sure that it's not? I ask questions to which I don't know the answer. And he asks these questions and he receives marvelous answers that open his mind and change his vision. And at this point he trusts this emanation that he perceives of the Buddha of wisdom that becomes his main spiritual guide. And so in the texts of Lama Tsongkhapa, at the beginning of the text, very often it is paid homage to Manjushri because he was his main guru at the end. But the point is that Lama Tsongkhapa, aside from the story of his life, managed to give clarity to the teachings in an incredible way, also because during his time, another time there was division, the tendency that was there at the time. So either you practice the philosophical part of the sutra or the meditative part of the tantra. You wouldn't really be able to match the two things. They were lived like the hot and the cold, two things that can be together. And Lama Tsongkhapa put them together in a coherent and clear way. And so the other master through which these teachings arrived to us now was Lama Tsongkhapa, and I invite everyone to read his story. There was also published recently in Italian, the story of Lama Tsongkhapa from the publishing house of the Italian Buddhist Union. And so from the beginning of the 15th century up to today, there had been many masters that put this into practice, but among those who have touched more the hearts than others was also Panchen Losang Chokyi Gyatsen, who wrote the Guru Puja. And then one of the most important masters, and very recent, was Pabonka Rinpoche. To say about the quantity of texts that were written on the Lam Rim is enormous. If we put them all together, of the commentaries on the Lam Rim, it's really a lot. But during all these centuries, since when the Lama Tsongkhapa wrote the Great Exposition of the Lam Rim, no one wrote something that would go beyond it, but there were many commentaries simplifying it. And what became, for excellence, the manual for practice that was more adept and used was Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand of Pabonka Rinpoche, that we have represented on that side, where you have the translation boot on above. Starting from the left, we have Nagarjuna, then you have Panchen Losang Chokyi Gyatsen, Pabonka Rinpoche, the 10th Panchen Lama, and then Tema Gonsen Rinpoche. Those are those that we have represented there. Pabonka Rinpoche was at this time the master of all the masters present in the Galupa tradition. So practically there was no one during his time that was not his disciple. There was a time where it was also offered to him to become the king of Tibet. And he says, no, I don't put myself in the midst of politics. I don't want to know about these things. And Pabonka Rinpoche really became someone with a really big power of influence from the point of view of Dharma. It's nice to be able to read the biography of Pabonka Rinpoche to get into the details of his life, but mainly it's nice to know him through his texts. And one of the most important ones is this one, Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, that we will use as a starting point, as a structure. Then I invite who wants to go deeper on this to take the book. It's a translation, and as we said many times, the translations has some pros and cons, but in order to be able to follow together. And so we have this direct connection because the text was taught by Pabonka Rinpoche and transcribed and edited by Trijal Rinpoche, that again is the reincarnation of one of our masters, of my master. Trijal Rinpoche was the master of Lama Rinpoche. We have a constant contact with the reincarnation of Trijal Rinpoche, and so we have a direct connection. What I wanted to say is that this line of transmission that comes to Tibet through Atisha and that goes to Lama Je Tsong Khapa through an uninterrupted line, generation to generation, comes to us not in a like a faraway way, but in an accessible and close way. So we're not talking of something that was taught by a person that was an amateur. You know, it was a person that had experience and their realization. So that's what makes these words with a lot of value. The text itself, as we said before, is divided in 4 main parts of the path. And it's important to understand that these are not like chapters of the book, it's also the path that needs to be walked. But the structure, let's go and take it back here in Tibetan. For was this book? Okay, there isn't the number of the page. Page 696, more or less. And here you have the summary. So the first part is the qualities of the authors, illustrated to show that the teachings have a pure origin. Then we have the second point, the fundamental point. That is the excellent qualities of the Dharma, and to develop respect for this teaching, the correct way of listening and teaching the Dharma, and who possesses these perfect qualities, and the qualities of the authors and of the Dharma itself. And then there is the fourth part, that is the way to guide disciples through the actual teaching. So the first part, we have already studied it, that is that of seeing the importance of the teachings of the teacher and to understand where does all of this come from. And as I said before, I invite you to read the lives of these masters and to get closer and to understand better where do we come from, because there are 2 ways. One is to share some teachings in a bit of an informal way where you are touched, you reflect, and then there is the fact of studying, of going deeper, of allowing oneself to get into a knowledge bit by bit, That is something that unfortunately we are not used to doing so much anymore. But actually it's very important. It's important to allow ourselves to open to a new world and to get into it bit by bit, and also to understand the difficult things. And so in this path there are some difficult concepts, but it's really because they are difficult, that we need to face them. The easy ones, I can just tell you, read them and understand them on your own, but the difficult ones, we need to face them.
Una volta avendo visto I maestri
Having seen the masters that gave these teachings, let's try to understand what are they about. Why are these teachings important? To the point that when there were, for example, moments where there were monks, practitioners that went away from Tibet and had to choose one book to bring with them, with the possibility of losing everything else, many chose this book. And so it's like among all the most important. And so it's described the excellent qualities of the Dharma, that is divided in how many parts we have here? We have 7 points. The excellent qualities that allow to recognize that all the teachings are without contradiction. Then we have the excellent qualities that allow you to recognize all the scriptures, teaching to put them into practice. The excellent qualities that allow you to comprehend easily the true thought of the victorious one. Then the excellent qualities that allow you to eliminate even the worst negative actions. The Lam Rim is complete because it contains all the teachings from Sutra and Tantra, and is simple to put into practice because it analyzes the gradual development of the mind. And related to different other traditions, it comes from the first fundamental point. Buddha gave many teachings. But if I put all the sutras here in front of you, as it has already, I have already looked at all the various sutras, and many of them are already translated also in English. And now, even now today, you can take any language, put into artificial intelligence, and translate all the things. But let's say that I make some magic, and in an instant you're able to read Tibetan, and I put all the sutras of Buddha in front of you. One is lost, in the sense that there are so many, and they are so difficult also to understand, because they use a way of talking that is very ancient, that were written around 2300 years ago. So they have a way to speak that for us is very difficult to access, and they had like a way to go around things to get to the central point. So when we take the texts of Buddha, such as the Sutra of the Perfection of Wisdom, we really have a hard time. And our tendency that has been there with many practitioners along the centuries is to see the different aspects of the teachings as contradictory. Like as we said this morning, in one text is explaining how to swim and another one how to walk. So which one is the right thing? They are different contexts. So here what Atisha does, first of all, is to take all the teachings of Buddha and to put them together in a coherent way, where there will be no contradiction anymore. So for example, Buddha at the beginning, he explained that we have to love ourselves, that we should be able to take care of ourselves in a correct way. Then there was another aspect where he said that you have to love the others and to open the heart and to take care of the others. Can they seem contradictory? If to one I say take care of yourself and to the other take care of the others. And what has happened for centuries that there were those who said, no, Buddha never said take care of the others, I have to take care of myself. And there were the others, no, but those are lower teachings, our teachings are higher, and then we have to take care of the others. But the reality is that you cannot take care of the others without first taking care of yourself. It's not possible to love the others without first loving yourself. And so, the teachings of Buddha that were split into these categories, that we have the Hinayana vehicle, the Mahayana vehicle, and the Vajrayana vehicle, that means different methods for the spiritual and personal growth that very often have been seen as separate things and here are put together in a coherent way. So Atisha had this beautiful capacity of showing that they are like different steps of a same ladder, where each step has its own function, its own time, and so we need to respect all of them and to integrate them together in the path. It's not something that either you do this or you do that. And it's fundamental, this, because if I put emphasis on having to love others, that it's important. So we talk about bodhicitta, to develop love and compassion in an altruistic way towards the others, and we can spend a whole life on putting emphasis on loving the others. But if we don't allow, first of all, to love correctly ourselves, then to love the others will just remain like a concept. We will never really be able to do it. And so it's for this that when Buddha taught how to love oneself, that in a few words is what it's just transmitted in the Hinayana teachings, is fundamental, is super important. And when we're able to love ourselves, then we can take the next step of managing to extend this love and to love the others. When he talks about the correct view of reality, there is a point where Buddha explains, for example, that reality is objective and external. Buddha speaks of a material reality that is external, where he explains that what we see is the light that touches our eyes and so on, but he's talking about an external reality of atoms, he's speaking of a reality that is completely external and solid. Then after a while he says, yes, but there is also mind. Yes, mind has an important role, and actually reality is not external, it's the external and internal together. Then there is another point where Buddha says, look, reality actually doesn't exist independently of mind. And then eventually he says, external reality is there, but it doesn't exist independently of the internal reality, and the internal reality is there, but it doesn't exist independently of the external reality. They are mutually dependent. And when we take, one says, the reality exists only in the mind, and reality is just completely external, it seems contradictory, but the reality is that if I don't start with understanding there is an external reality and I start to see the aspect of mind, I can start to fall in the nihilistic vision. So it's like steps in the ladder, and Atisha here puts them together. Things that for centuries have been separated. And we have this great fortune. And so, other than this, there is the part of the sutra and the tantra and the philosophy of the meditation of managing our internal energies and to bring the result in the path that is the Vajrayana Buddhism. And also here for a long time has been remained as something separate, and Atisha put them together, and Lama Tsong Khapa put them together again. And so we have one path that puts all the teachings together in a coherent way where there are no contradictions and conflicts inside. And this by itself is something unique. And here I want to read a sentence from Lama Tsong Khapa. And in the lunch break I made a translation that I have here. I read it and then I go to... The text of Lama Tsong Khapa is called the Great Treat on the Stages of the Path to Enlightenment, that contains the condensed version of all the teachings of Buddha. Homage to Guru, Manjushri, body created by myriads of virtues and perfect excellencies, word that mind that perceives everything that is knowledgeable as it is. To the Supreme of Shakya, Buddha Shakyamuni, with the head I prostrate. To the Supreme of the Sons of the Supreme Master, that brings the weight of all the victorious one, the acts, bringing forward the actions of the Buddhas and manifests himself with innumerable emanations in different fields. To the invisible Manjushri I pay homage. To the very profound and unknowable mother of the victorious ones, that is the correct view of reality, because a being becomes a Buddha through the correct view of reality, and that is the mother of the Buddha. So that is represented as a personification with that statue that we have there, the Prajna Paramita. The last statue following from here to the left to the right, the yellow one in a female aspect, that is called the mother of all the Buddhas, the personification of wisdom, because the Buddha is born out of the correct view of reality. So to the very profound and unknowable, and to those that embark on its intent, to Nagarjuna and Asanga, to their feet I prostrate. From the two lineages, excellent lineages, the profound and the extended lineage, to the Pankara, Atisha, the custodian of the treasure of the instructions, I bow. The eye that contemplates all the teachings, the supreme door to access of the liberation for the fortunate ones, with means for enlightenment, I prostrate with respect. Today, the practitioners, the yogic practitioners, are diligent, but little, they don't know so much. The ones that know a lot are not expert in the practice. The majority have partial eyes to look at the teachings without the capacity of discerning and seeing the main points of the doctrine separated. In explaining this, this is the point, you who are not obfuscated by the darkness of prejudice, and who have the mental strength of discerning the positive and the negative, who have the desire to make the human freedom meaningful, fortunate ones listen with an attentive mind. And so here Lama Tsong Khapa puts emphasis on being free from obfuscation, from prejudice, and to have the strength of discernment. And this is important. And so it's not that we go and see and we receive some teachings, no, this one is my tradition, I just follow and I don't put into discussion. Because what has happened for a long time is that, okay, I follow what I have learned, you follow another thing, you have learned something, I've understood something else, and each one stays on its own way, which is the concept of dogma. In the dogma, there is a part where you don't ask why, you just kind of trust and follow. It's like recently, one of my masters that has already passed away, the abbot of Tashilhunpo in Tibet. One day he embarked on a journey with also other abbots of different monasteries, and there was a young man who was an abbot of a different tradition, Jonampa. And they have like points of view in the about the correct view of reality, like in the level of details, they're a bit different. And as they were on the train, it was a long way, so they started to discuss and to debate with this master who was old. Started to debate with him using the texts of Nagarjuna, of the previous masters, so not of Lama Tsong Khapa, because he was from a tradition that didn't recognize the authority of Lama Tsong Khapa. So at the end, okay, he couldn't really escape from that because he had like 10 hours of train. And the abbot, and he says, oh, look, with great respect towards you, but let's just remember, we can stay here and debate all day long, but at the end, you are Gelupa and I am Chunampa. You will follow Lama Tsong Khapa, I will follow Jo Taranata. And my master will say, no, we are not here to be Galupa or to be Chonampa. We are here to follow the truth, to comprehend, to analyze, to really have a path, because it's not that the point is not to be a good Galupa or a good Chanampa, but to have a coherent view of reality. And so we need to apply this capacity of discernment and to try to debate. And from my point of view, Lama Tsong Khapa didn't want to create a new tradition. He wanted to have clarity. But when he started to debate with people around to understand things, at a certain point everyone would say, no, this is not what the tradition is saying. And so at the end he started to write books to explain things, and he created his own tradition eventually, but the original intention was not that. And so that's why at the beginning of the text he remembers us, we shouldn't have an attitude that is narrow, closed. And for this, these teachings have this feature that it's really beautiful to take the different teachings of Buddha that for a long time has been something separated, and to put them together with coherence. And this just by itself is something really great. And other than this, and the second characteristic is the excellence qualities of the Dharma, explained in a way to develop respect for these teachings. And the second one is the excellent qualities that allow you to recognize as all the scriptures as teachings to put into practice. This is another point. We go and study all the Buddhist teachings. For centuries, universities on Buddhism have been created, like also today we have like university courses on Buddhism, but what's the point? Nothing against university courses, but what is the point of studying a philosophy of life if you don't put it into practice? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't, that the academics don't put it into practice. That's not what I'm saying, with great respect. What I'm saying is our goal is to transform our minds, not to become experts in the map, as we said before. And what has happened for centuries is that at some point in the teachings of Buddha became like an object of study, of debate, and they remained on a conceptual level. And if we take, for example, this text that I quoted recently, I quoted the 4 lines of the clear light of realization, a difficult text from Asanga. Even one day I wanted to memorize the commentary of this text and went to my master. I want to memorize this. He looked at me, your teeth are not strong enough to eat this. He said, let alone, let it go, just you won't be able to understand anything. So we have the Sutra of Buddha, the commentary of Asanga, then on that we have the commentary now I can't remember the name. There is a the one that I wanted to memorize. Now I even forgot the name. Then there is the commentary from Lama Tsong Khapa, and then all the other commentaries. But when we take these studies, even after 9 years of study of this, now you say, now you put it into practice, and you're like, how, where do I start? How can I do it? It's very difficult. It's very difficult because it's many, many concepts, very broad, very deep, but at the point of putting into practice in life, you don't know where to start from. It's really difficult, and in the Lam Rim we have the characteristics of putting into a structured and accessible way all this knowledge and how to put it into practice in the daily life. And so it has these characteristics of taking all the teachings of Buddha and how to use them by all effects to transform our mind, transform our life, to put them into practice and not to leave them uniquely on a conceptual level. And this for me is one of the most important features. So not only there are no contradictions and it's coherent, so it's able to put all the teachings of Buddha in a coherent way. It's able to take very complex concepts, aspects, and to put them in an accessible way that it's also adapt to the daily life. And for me, this is another wonderful characteristic, because honestly, for me, the first years that I was in Italy, I wanted to make a course to explain the ornament of clear realization. We even did a course where I took some of the arguments of the first chapter and we started to look at them, but the reality is that it's complex. You read, but at the end, at the point of putting into practice, what do you do? So to have a manual that is complete, step by step, of how to put it into practice, suitable for our life, is beautiful. And this is the second important characteristic.
Ok, qua Pabonka
Rinpoche extends the qualities a bit more in detail. Lama Tsong Khapa talks about 4 qualities. The third quality is the excellent qualities that allow you to easily understand the real thought of the victorious one. The victorious one is the Buddha. And here it says that through the teachings of the Lam Rim it's possible to get to comprehend what the Buddha meant. How does this path happen in a quite easy way, possible way? I ask you, who here has the time, the dedication for at least 25 years? Because the traditional studies of philosophy to get into the teachings, the Buddhist teachings in detail, last around 25 years. Who can do that? Is there someone here who says, yes, I start, but then it's 25 years, and it's around like 11 months a year, and it's like 12 hours a day of study. So if I come to you, do you like to study, to follow Buddhism? And I tell you, this is the program. I just remain on my own. Like this, the history of one was so if we start like this way, everyone would say, "Ah, oh, nice, beautiful," but who can actually do that? The problem is something else. Who does that is that someone who gets to the end of the 25 years, then he asks himself, how can I put it into practice? And I tell you, all those who have done this process, then that I've met, then they go back to the Lam Rim, because here there is the essence. This is the essence, this is where you have everything, this is how you put it into practice. like Buddhist for dummies, to make it step by step how to do it. But the interesting thing is that even those who have studied in an academic level, after many years, going round and round, eventually, where do they go take refuge as a path, as a method? Here. And so, it has this capacity of not having contradictions, of being in a way that it's possible to put into practice, and of making us understand quite easily the intention of Buddha Shakyamuni. And the fourth quality, mean the excellent qualities that allow you to eliminate even the worst negative actions, which means that through the teachings of the Lam Rim, if you're able to put them into practice quite easily, it's part of the first part, it allows us to revisit, to review our own conditionings. It starts from the fact, okay, what are we doing, where are we going, what is our conduct, and to revisit our own habits. And so these are the first qualities. Then Pabonka Rinpoche gets into other details, such as it's complete because it contains all the essential points of the Sutra and the Tantra, simple to put into practice because it emphasizes the gradual development of the mind, and despite of other traditions, it's particularly excellent because it contains the teachings of Asanga and Nagarjuna. And the fundamental point here is that it's accessible, it's there for all of us, it's done step by step, it's complete and it's coherent. And we have fortune today that actually we can face this in our own language, because even like the first teachings of Lam Rim that I did, okay, before that you understand something, and then there is a translation. Like even if you take the liberation in the palm of your hand, I invite you to read it with an eye of regard towards the fact that it was transmitted at the beginning of the 20th century in a monastic context in Tibet. Now today we need to adapt to the reality in which we are. There are things where we need to put more emphasis on, things where we need to put less emphasis on, and so we are in front of this beautiful map, this beautiful, for me the word map is one of the best, this guidance that is complete, that is coherent, that is a direction towards practice, and that helps us easily to revisit our habits. In other words, to put ourselves on the line, and then it's suitable for our reality. And absolutely, I don't think that this tradition is superior or better than that or the other. That, no. As Atisha was saying in one of his texts, we need to respect deeply. He said, respect deeply all the spiritual traditions and follow with determination the one that you like the most. And for me, I have no doubts that the teachings of Lam Rim are the best teachings and best possible path that among all for me. And I had the opportunity to study different things inside of Buddhism, to see different approaches, other religions, other things, from the more modern things of neuroscience to various things that we have go round and round, but I go back to Lam Rim. And the Lam Rim is not the text also. The text is nothing but a representation of a map of a path. So it's the steps that we need to take that are clear, simple, accessible for each one of us. And so today I wanted mainly to introduce you to what we will go and do, because it's important for us to understand where we are, to understand what we have in front of us. Very often, someone asks me, "Yes, Lama, I would like to follow Buddhism. Where do I start from?" From here, there are all the steps. For step 1, step 2, step 3. The real difficulty is that the step 1, step 2, and step 3, it's not recite this, read that, it's change your mind. The first step, which is to recognize the preciousness of this life, is not a conceptual thing, it's to generate a profound feeling where you really see the preciousness of this life. And the Lam Rim guides us on how to generate this internal state. And so when we go back to this verse of Lama Tsong Khapa, know how fortunate you are to get into this, to enter this, because very often we say, where do I start from, what do I do? When we think about a path, with a path to get to reach a state of balance and peace, and to get out of our own dynamics and a cycle of suffering. And how do we do it, we ask ourselves. Here we have step by step. The important thing is that it needs to be done in a gradual way, constant, coherent, with no hurry. And for this, I can also, take it and do the general teaching on the Lam Rim in 2 days, or even one day, or even 1 hour. But that's not the goal. The goal is to be able to walk together, to make an internal movement. Otherwise, we are just here talking. We really have to do that internal movement. And it's interesting to see that the more we study, the more we also see that things are simple actually. Sometimes we need to make them more complicated to understand it, but actually things are simple, and one of the qualities of the Lam Rim is the capacity of taking arguments that have been treated in a very complicated way and to bring them in a simple way, accessible. So even if there is like an infinity of teachings and books, this one here is enough. But as I said before, I invite you to read it with this eye of regard to the fact that it was transmitted in a different context. And I feel fortunate today to make this bridge, cultural bridge, temporal bridge, because also when Pabonka Rinpoche taught at the beginning of the 20th century, and Lama Tsong Khapa in the beginning of the 15th century, many centuries passed, but the culture didn't change so much. So from the beginning of the 20th century up to in Tibet and up to now here in Italy, how much did the culture change? Really a lot. We are in a different context, and so it's important also for us to adapt, to see the way on how to generate those internal states, and this is a challenge that we will take together during these days. Once I read that the majority of our thoughts every day are repetitions of previous thoughts. When I read, if I remember well, it was like more than 90% of our thoughts. And according to me, it's not so wrong. Our tendency is to repeat what we already know. Our tendency is to see the world through our knowledge, our experience, what we already are and know. And one of the most magical things that I was able to see, one of the great miracles that exists for me that we all live every day, is the capacity of communicating and to transmit knowledge. Because if I try to explain you something, or you try to explain me something, in the moment that you or me are trying to explain, what is the only tool that we can use to make someone else understand something? What the other already knows. Me, if I want to make you understand a concept, I need to use the concepts that you already have to put them together in order to make you understand something new. Otherwise, I could say, I go and explain I've said it, but it's your business if whether you understood or not. The reality is that if I want to share something, I need to use your knowledge, not mine. And the beauty that it's incredible when it's accomplished to take this, how can I say, when someone explains us something, it's as if I'm taking what it's already inside of me and to kind of remodel it, rearrange it, to put the relationships in a different way. From that, our mind opens to something new. Because if, in order to explain something, the only tool that I have is what you already know, how can I make you understand something new? By putting together this knowledge in a way that opens your mind for something different. And for me, this is a miracle that is happening each time. It's something that if you try to understand how does it happen, then we can't manage. But the point that it's there. And for me personally, one of the most important things that I was able to see, to experience in my life up to today was when I read, I listened to, and someone was able to interact with me in a way that my mind opened to see the world in a way that I didn't see before, to see myself in a way that I didn't see before, to understand reality in a different way. For me, this is one of the most beautiful experiences that we can have. And so here we have a path that has been followed by thousands of people for centuries. Unfortunately, not like millions. Some tens of thousands. I cannot give a precise number because it's not like something that... It's not like there is the book of those who have practiced the Lam Rim or... But there have been thousands of people who put into practice. It's not like after 2 centuries, no, what Lama Tsong Khapa said doesn't work, we have to change here and there. No, that remained coherent up to today. And we have these steps in a way that it's accessible for us, that help us to open our mind and to change our perspective. And what is fundamental here is that we need to allow ourselves to drop the greatest competitor of the Lam Rim. Who's competing the most with our path towards enlightenment? Our mundane goals, the fact that we are there trying to solve the small problems, no, I know that I should meditate and the preciousness of this life. Wow, I've been introduced to this word of the stages of the path, of the Lam Rim. I want to understand more, meditate. I really we're talking about the first point, so the preciousness of life. But then I say, now I can't familiarize with the preciousness of human life because I need to look at that serious. Because I need to bring the children at school, because I need to do this and that. They have to eat, to digest, to work, to buy, to do this and that. Because one is happy and the other one is discontent. And we get lost in daily life. I don't know how often you have had this feeling of running, doing a lot of things, and at the end you ask yourself, what am I doing? And one of the marvelous features of the Lam Rim is the capacity of transforming the daily life into the path. And so it never in these teachings it is said you should quit your life. What is said, it's okay, you should live it in this way in order to live it in a more meaningful way. And it changes completely. And so reflecting a bit on this challenge, that sometimes I hear people saying, I quit everything. There was this girl, this woman that was a doctor in the 60s or 70s. This excellent doctor, married with children at the top of her career, gets close to Buddhism. She falls in love with Dharma completely. She quits everything. Quits the job, the husband, the children, everything. Goes to India. She follows the masters that just arrived from Tibet. Goes to meditate in the caves, in the mountains close to Dharamsala. 2 years pass, 3 years, something like that, and then she is a bit disappointed because she wasn't a Buddha yet. She didn't obtain the realizations, but I've put so much energy, I've done all of that, and the reality, here I open and close a brief parenthesis, that the path, it's a bit like an X. That is, okay, at the beginning, the more we are at the beginning of the path, what happens is that the quantity of effort that you need to put is lower. The more gross are the mental defilements, the more we need to face the gross aspects of ourselves. The more gross it is, the less the effort that is necessary. And the more the subtler the mental defilements, the more we need the effort. It's a bit like cleaning. Something is like taking away the gross dirt. You just take the broom and bam. Something else is taking away the stains of oil from the wood. There you have to go and use the special products, really to stay there day after day to work. So when one begins the path, everything easy. Then as you progress, it's longer than you thought. And so she spends these 2 or 3 years. No, it doesn't work. She's disappointed, and long story short, she goes back to England. She quits the life to which she was dedicated, but she didn't have a job anymore. The children also were kind of deluded, disappointed. The husband was not there. She didn't have a house. And what did she blame? The Dharma. So eventually she was left without the one and the other. So this is an example for me that was given to say, okay, that we should integrate the practice in our lives. We shouldn't abandon our lives. This is fundamental. Then there is who at a certain point has the means to dedicate a period, to do a certain retreat, to dedicate more time to a study. That is something else. But the idea of abandoning the life that we do to go and search for a path doesn't really work like that. And here we have the great luck of having a tool that allows us to integrate spiritual practice into our own life. But as I said before, we need to have the determination of wanting to do it. And one of the warnings, if I had to put like a disclaimer at the beginning of the Lam Rim, is look that You will need to face yourself, to look at yourself in the eyes. You will see beautiful things and things not so nice. Look that you need to get out of your comfort zones. You need to walk against the current, to face against the currents of your own habits. It's a wonderful path, joyous, but sometimes difficult, tiring. And this remembers me when I went to live in India, the monastery of Sera. The first day that I got there, not really the first day, but the first days, I go and visit my master, Geshe Rinche, with my father. I was 12 years old. We were there all content of being there and so on. We were all very nice. And when I get there, Geshe Rinche, he looks at us and he asks us, "What are you doing here? Who do you think you are? You think that it's easy to just be here and all this study? It's not about 2 or 3 years. We're talking about a lifetime. So, according to me, you're wrong. Just go back to school. When you are a grown-up, if you want to study Buddhism, you come here and go deeper on that. Because if you stay here and don't study well, then you don't have one thing and the other. Maybe you spend here 5 or 10 years, then you don't bring it forward. Then at a certain point, you don't have the Western education. You didn't complete well the Eastern things of Buddhism, and you're left with nothing. And it was very hard, very tough. And that day we went out with the looking down. My father was angry. I take my son here and look what they tell us. The point that Lama had to look another master for me because he had to be my main master. And so at that point I went to another one, Geshe Tripten Topje, and eventually I had both. And he was known as the Master Buddha, like as a level of kindness. He was always kind with everyone, always good, and so that was completely different. And Geshe Thupten Rinche actually was one of the most important masters, and we created a wonderful bond, and he guided me and taught me in an incredible way. But that first approach was important because there is a difference when we want to do something seriously, really, and when we want to do something just a bit like that, superficially. And I'm sorry to put it like this, but this is a path that we need to do seriously. Which means it's not a matter of one day or 1 year, it's not a course that we do, it's a path of life. And the question is, do I want to do it or not? It's not that we have to give the answer immediately. It's something that we have to reflect on and go deeper on it. I don't have problems if tomorrow we see each other again and we are just 3 people. If those 3 really want, then I'm happy. Then if we are many people, even better. But from the point, since honestly, someone says, look, I'm not really convinced, but I want to listen, I want to, you're welcome. But to really catch the opportunity, we need to really get involved, and we have an opportunity to do this. And so I wanted to thank you to be here together, not only here today, but to follow this path together. And honestly, I can say without a shadow of doubt that where I learned the most was in having to share and teach. And even these days, the fact of having chosen to be here, to be here and teach at Lam Rim made me revisit things and to read again and receive also a lot of benefit on this. And so I really thank you. And I hope that we can continue this path with enthusiasms, where every step is important, is profound, needs its time, and really the fact that we follow the Lam Rim as we put it into practice, that is more like one weekend a month, is similar to what Pabonka Rinpoche did, because he went to his master 1 or 2 days a month, more or less. He went there, received the teachings, Then he said, okay, now you go and meditate. You read again, reflect, you come back to me when you have understood. And so it's much better actually to have these explanations by having some time in the middle to reflect and meditate. Otherwise, we are doing everything one thing after the other because we have to finish. I don't know why there is this hurry to finish. We have to walk, we don't have to finish, but I've lived this many times. You start with explanation of the Lam Rim, maybe you want to finish it. No, you need to practice it. Maybe takes a lifetime, what does it matter? But the fact to do it with a certain periodicity also gives it the time to reflect, to meditate, to grow together on this. Now let's make our own dedications. I have the clock there, that it's always stopped at 5:10. Luckily, I have here my phone here. Here there is an important aspect for me. That is where when I started to give the teachings, something that I didn't like is when they asked me, what is the time that it ends? What is the hurry? When I went to receive the teachings from my master, I never had like the time, the ending time. Maybe it was like 4 or 5 hours, sometimes maybe 40 minutes. But we are not in a hurry to have to conclude, to end. Like once, one of my masters said, one of the disciples was not there, was not present, and he waited there. And as he was not coming, he said, why is he not here? What does he have more important to do than to be here? And he was right. And this is it's the fact of that. It's very nice to just be able to share Dharma, to go deeper on that. What hurry do we have to go back to the phone, to talk about all the things that we're used to talk about, and to really leave it slowly? It's also important. And so I thank you for the clock to be stopped, because it helps us to connect less with the time. So now let's make our dedications, the final dedications. One important thing is that traditionally, when the ceremonies, the pujas are done, then there is a person read the dedication, um, as when we do during the Guru Puja, and traditionally, when there are the teachings, there may be some people offering the teachings, and this is because from centuries there was not the thing that you had to pay for the teachings, but you have like alive costs connected. So there was the opportunity of who wants to offer, and so usually one who offers the teachings does the mandala offerings at the beginning, and you read the names to dedicate. And so today we dedicate these teachings that, and we made the request and offered especially today.
Michela, Gabriele, Carmigna, Elena, Angelo, Letizia, Maria Cristina. Quindi dedichiamo a tutti loro.
So we dedicate to all of them and to all of us, so that may everyone be able to put into practice and to grow in his along the path towards enlightenment. And then now we do the dedications. The prayers that we are doing now are those that are being done by Je Rinpoche, Pabonka Rinpoche, are exactly the same prayers that we do at the beginning. Then the next times we will also put the translations.
Ringraziamo per poter essere.
Let's thank in order to be here, for being here today now, for the masters of the lineage that allow ourselves to be here now. Let's make the mandala offering and then our dedications.
Ni de gem pa di sangye shing la che o par sho Je Tsong Lame kutse rapten chi nam kara trinle chokchur ge pada lo san tempe dreme sasumgi drove munse taktu ne gyur chi yidama guru ratna mendrala kam niryata yami Kewa kuntu yanda lama dan drame cheki pela longche ching sadan lamge yunte rapso ne dorje change kopa nyur tobe sho Tene rintu bele tsoni ni katra yangpa karshe sakpa te Lomi mari gidon rowana namren gyawe wangboro dagiru chi terma songwe tseraba kundu yang jambe yangi tsewe jesung tempe rimba kunsa lamge cho nyene drube gyanam nyeche sho rangi chishin tokpe lamge ne shukra tsewe changpe tap Drove yigi mumba selchene gyawe tempa yurin zingyuruchi tempa rinchen chogi mabkya pan kyabkya nyambra gyurbe chokterani ninje chembu yiraba kyopa ye pende terte selwara chebra sho gyase gyawe mechun tinglele lektru jancho lamgi rimbe kyang Tarde namge yila peltere shin gyawe tsepa rinto kyongyuru chi lamsang gyawe tungen drupche chi galken seche mida miming kun tsera kundu gyawe ngakpa ye namda lamdan dralwar magyuru chi kanse tekpa chola che che chu tsuchin drupla tsumpa teye tse namge taktu troche chin trashi gyatso chochur kyab kyur chi chanchu simchu rinpoche make panam ke gyur chi kepa nyambra me payang kongne kontu pelwar Sho nimo dele tsendele nime kunyan delekshi delekpe kuncho sumki chingi lob kuncho sumki ngodrubo tsol kuncho sumki trashi shon All'alba o al tramonto, di notte o durante il giorno, possono i tre gioielli concederci le loro benedizioni, possono aiutarci ad ottenere tutte le realizzazioni e cospargere il sentiero della nostra vita con molti segni di buon auspicio. At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings, may they help us to achieve all realizations, and sprinkle all the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Mi me tsewe ter chen cher di me kempe Wampo jampe liang de opong ma lu o jom tse sang we da kan chen kepe so gen en Tsong Khapa san Grazie a tutti. Ci rivediamo.
Thank you everyone. We will meet again tomorrow morning at 10:30.